It was supposed to be just another political panel, filled with formalities and long-winded arguments. But what unfolded between Representative Jasmine Crockett and Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh turned into one of the most talked-about confrontations in recent political memory. As the two appeared together during a televised town hall-style debate on legal accountability and political ethics, tension was already in the air. The event, hosted at a major civic center with a live audience, brought in a mix of scholars, students, and regular citizens. From the moment they took their seats, the energy in the room was electric. Jasmine Crockett, known for her sharp intellect and unapologetic voice, greeted the audience with poise, while Kavanaugh kept his usual stoic demeanor. At first, the conversation remained civil, with both parties responding to moderated questions about legal reform and constitutional boundaries, but it didn't take long before things started to heat up, especially when Kavanaugh began making subtle digs wrapped in legal jargon that seemed aimed at undermining Crockett's experience and stance. The first jab came when Kavanaugh referred to certain congressional figures as performers rather than policymakers. Clearly a sideways shot at Crockett and a few of her progressive peers. Crockett didn't react initially. She simply listened, maintained her composure, and waited for her turn. But the audience noticed her slight smile, a sign that she was preparing to respond in a way that would flip the entire room. When she finally did, it was with surgical precision. "I'd rather perform truth for the people than hide behind a robe and call it neutrality," she said, drawing loud cheers and applause. Kavanaugh raised an eyebrow, visibly caught off guard by her wit. He tried to push back, arguing that elected officials often relied too heavily on emotional appeal over constitutional literacy. Crockett didn't flinch. "Let's talk literacy then," she fired back, listing legal precedents and court decisions that contradicted many of Kavanaugh's own rulings, exposing gaps in his logic with shocking fluency. The crowd erupted. What truly set the audience ablaze was when Kavanaugh attempted to label Crockett's activism as dangerous populism, warning that undue public influence on lawmakers could lead to unstable governance. The tone of his voice was sharp, and his language veiled in a kind of elitism that didn't sit well with the people in the room. Crockett, however, leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "What's truly dangerous is when judges pretend. Their robes make them invisible to criticism, while their decisions reshape lives without accountability," she said. At that point, the moderator tried to intervene and redirect the conversation, but the audience wouldn't have it. Cheers and claps drowned out the moderator's words, as the moment belonged entirely to Crockett. Even those who came in unsure about her left with newfound respect. Her confidence, eloquence, and refusal to be talked down to by someone wielding legal power sent a strong message. Women of color like her were no longer asking for space at the table, they were taking it. Kavanaugh, rattled by the crowd's energy and Crockett's intellectual dominance, decided to go on the offensive. He brought up one of Crockett's previous interviews where she criticized the judicial system's lack of empathy. He questioned whether such remarks showed a disregard for judicial impartiality. Crockett came prepared. "There's a difference between impartiality and indifference," she responded sharply. "And far too often, we mistake cold detachment for fairness." She explained how empathy does not negate legal integrity, but rather strengthens it, by ensuring that justice is not only theoretical, but lived and felt by real people. The audience fell silent for a moment, digesting her words, before another wave of applause swept the room. Kavanaugh tried to change the subject, pivoting to crime statistics and invoking classic Law and Order talking points, but Crockett didn't let up. She reminded him that laws should serve people, not control them, and that invoking fear to justify policy was a tactic as old as oppression itself. In a final attempt to reassert his authority, Kavanaugh leaned into the topic of Supreme Court ethics, subtly implying that public officials like Crockett use their positions to chase media clout. That's when things hit a boiling point. Crockett leaned back in her chair, shook her head with a grin, and said, "Let's not pretend anyone on this stage doesn't know a thing or two about media attention. "I didn't cry on national television to land a lifetime appointment." The reference was direct, and Katinga called back to Kavanaugh's infamous and emotional confirmation hearings. The audience gasped, then immediately erupted into a mix of laughter and applause. Kavanaugh's face turned red, his lips pressed tightly. He paused, seemingly unsure whether to address the jab or ignore it. But Crockett had already moved on, turning the conversation back to judicial accountability and public trust, effectively robbing him of the opportunity to defend himself or change the subject. Asterisk throughout the event. Crockett showed not only intellectual prowess, but emotional intelligence. She knew when to strike and when to retreat, when to educate and when to call out hypocrisy. Her ability to dissect complicated legal issues and explain them in relatable terms made her a standout. While Kavanaugh appeared increasingly flustered, every attempt he made to lecture her was met with either direct factual rebuttals or rhetorical finesse that kept the audience firmly in her corner. Viewers watching the live stream flooded social media with reactions, calling her performance a masterclass in grace under fire. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett, Clapback, and hashtag shutdown session started trending within minutes. Political commentators, both liberal and conservative, couldn't deny that Crockett had dominated the evening. Even those who didn't agree with her policies had to admit that she held her own against a Supreme Court justice in a way that was both informed and fearless. Asterisk, as the event neared its conclusion, the moderator opened the floor to questions from the audience. One attendee asked Crockett what it meant to her to confront someone like Kavanaugh so publicly. Her answer was thoughtful. "It means not letting titles intimidate truth. It means standing in the gap for people who don't get to be in these rooms, let alone speak up. It means not letting bad behavior hide behind good suits in old institutions." The applause that followed was thunderous. When Kavanaugh was asked a similar question, his answer felt rehearsed and hollow by comparison, filled with vague commitments to legal excellence and judicial ethics. The contrast between the two could not have been more stark. One spoke from lived experience and conviction, the other from a carefully constructed wall of institutional protection. It became clear to everyone in the room which voice resonated more deeply and more honestly. Asterisk, the buzz didn't stop after the cameras turned off. Media outlets rushed to write about the clash, with headlines painting Crockett as the evening's undeniable victor. Progressive networks praised her for challenging judicial arrogance, while even some conservative platforms acknowledged that Kavanaugh had been caught off guard by her preparation and poise. In follow-up interviews, Crockett downplayed the idea of it being a personal win, saying instead that she hoped it encouraged more young people, especially women of color, to speak boldly, even in intimidating spaces. She emphasized that her goal wasn't to embarrass Kavanaugh, to show that the public deserves clarity, accountability, and respect, regardless of how powerful someone thinks they are. Her humility in the aftermath only increased public admiration. While Kavanaugh remained silent, releasing no statements and declining all interview requests, political analysts noted that the event could mark a shift in how judicial figures are treated in public forums going forward. Asterisk, in the days that followed, support for Crockett poured in from all corners. Fellow lawmakers tweeted their praise. Advocacy groups sent messages of solidarity, and even some former judges admitted, anonymously, that the legal system needed more voices like hers. Students at law schools across the country began using clips of the event in classrooms to study debate tactics and rhetorical structure. Crockett's office reportedly received hundreds of thank you letters from citizens who felt heard and represented. Her opponents, meanwhile, struggled to find footing. Attempts to paint her as disrespectful fell flat in the face of overwhelming public support and the clear evidence that her arguments were grounded in truth and integrity. The confrontation didn't just end in the room that night. It sparked a larger conversation about how power is wielded and challenged, and what courage looks like when it stands face to face with authority.